Welcome, my darlings, to my humble chateau. Please make yourself very comfortable. Relax your mind and release your imagination to me. I will bring you a story to entrance and entertain. Perhaps a frightening one. Perhaps a steampunk. Perhaps a bit of mythology. Anyway, sit back, enjoy, and subscribe to me. Pseudologia Fantastica by Nana488. I never liked my sister. I know, that sounds kind of cruel and like something a sister would say, but you'd be surprised to hear that my parents didn't especially like her either. And believe me when I say there are plenty of reasons for that. When I was 4, my sister Fiona was born. Nothing was all that unusual about how she was born. As far as I can remember, my mother wasn't even in that much pain. And Dad would later tell me that Mom's labor, with me and later Fiona, were among the quickest deliveries the staff has ever seen. Neither of us lacked for anything when we were kids. We had to spend a lot of time in daycare because Mom was a financial advisor and Dad was a personal injury lawyer. Both of them worked quite a bit, though it meant both of them brought home 7 figures several years. By the time I started school, my mother could afford to spend more time at home. As soon as Fiona turned 3, things changed. I was at school when I discovered that my backpack was wet. I leaned in to examine further, and then screamed when I caught the foul stench of urine. Fearing for the health of my classmates, and with me crying, I was allowed to go home early. When I got home, I looked down at the spot where I kept my backpack, and immediately noticed it was wet, too. Before I could say anything, I heard Fiona giggling. That, of course, prompted me to tell our parents what I expected had happened. The part that upset me the most was how Fiona reacted. She didn't even look guilty over being caught. In fact, she was bouncing up and down on her feet with how much attention she was getting. Our parents sent her to bed without dinner. Fiona never admitted that she peed in my school bag, and to be honest, if it was just that one time, it would most likely have just been an embarrassing story. If that was only the case. Fiona was 7 when she started to fake being sick or in pain. The most common complaint was a stomachache or a foot cramp. But as she got older, it turned into taking too much acetaminophen and claiming she had the flu. It got her out of tests at school, but it didn't take long for me and my parents to catch on, which is why she took to faking it for her teachers. Most of them caught on to the stunts too, and she stopped getting out of tests. In fact, she started losing recess over it. And as she got into middle school and high school, started receiving detention. Then came the stories from her friends. I can't remember how many times I had to tell people she never met Denzel Washington or Robert Downey Jr., or whoever she decided to claim she had shaken hands with at that week. She routinely lost friends over it. By the time she was in her 2nd year of high school, half the school knew to avoid her because of all she claimed. Even my college friends began catching on. She frequently claimed to have built her own car or motorcycle, only for me to have to tell my friends and roommates that she'd never even used a wrench in her life. Then came the FBI incident. She had been caught sneaking off campus and decided to get out of it by telling the principal she thought she saw a man with a gun in the woods. Almost immediately, the entire school was put on lockdown. Everyone was told to hide inside their classrooms, as per the usual lockdown drills, and police were called to survey the scene, looking for the supposed gunman. The FBI was called in and, with the help of a police sketch artist, she drew a portrait of what she saw. For 4 days they looked for the supposed gunman. It was all my local town news could talk about. But after no leads turning up, the police became suspicious. They finally did what they should have done from the beginning and looked at the school surveillance cameras. Fiona was promptly arrested and only a few months later found herself on probation. With her unable to leave the house, that meant she was barred from coming along when my parents visited me for my birthday. I was glad Fiona wouldn't be seeing me, but my parents and I were still on edge over what we knew she'd attempt if she had the chance. Halfway through dinner, Fiona called us, claiming a burglar entered the house and broke her rib. Dad just told her to shut up and call the police if she was so worried about it. Then he just hung up and turned his phone off so she wouldn't pester us. Much to everyone's surprise, my parents returned home to find that Fiona really did suffer a broken rib. The police at the scene, however, couldn't find any evidence of a burglary. No sign of a break-in, nothing stolen, or anything else for that matter. And with the bruises on Fiona's body, it was much more likely that she simply tripped and fell down the stairs. That was what it took for my parents to finally take her to a psychiatrist, who in turn recommended a therapist, and there Fiona was, in therapy for the rest of her high school career. It wasn't until she'd been in therapy for 2 or 3 months that I realized the term the therapist and psychiatrist used, pseudological Fantastica, was just a fancy way of saying pathological liar. The therapy did seem to work, oddly enough, or at least that's how it seemed. Whenever we mentioned her therapist, Fiona seemed genuinely afraid. With Fiona's compulsive lying, though, we doubted her claims of what was going on. That didn't make what Fiona claimed happened any less creepy, though. "She put something in the house. I've seen it," she muttered. "What are you talking about, Fiona? The burglar that never existed?" At that point, she just stormed up to her room, as if somehow that would make me believe her. The only thing I could do was tell our parents about the incident, who told her therapist and psychiatrist. Fiona continued with therapy all throughout college. She had no choice, since Dad threatened not to pay her tuition if she didn't. There were times he almost did, too. Fiona decided it would be a good idea to lie about seeing her college therapist when she really skipped out. Soon after she graduated from college, Fiona got pregnant with twins. My parents and I hoped it would finally make her realize the error of her ways. By that time, with my career as a linguist all but secure, I had a husband and a daughter of my own, and saw how much being a mother changed me. I just hoped it would have the same effect on Fiona. The twins were named Abigail and Elizabeth, Abby and Lizzie as we came to call them. Personally, I found them adorable, and couldn't help but find them looking like they were doing impersonations of the Buddha with how scrunched their faces were. Fiona, however, just sulked, as if she couldn't bear the fact that people were paying attention to the babies instead of her. "Why do you care so much about a pair of stupid babies, Jackie?" Fiona sneered. "Everyone was once a baby, you know." "Hey, leave your sister alone," Dad barked back. People pay this much attention to you when you were born, too. I hope you know that." I really wish Dad hadn't said that. Abby and Lizzie weren't a month yet when Fiona rushed them to the hospital for the first time. Both girls were blue when they arrived. I saw the photos. They really were. In case you were wondering, Dr. Speak called it being cyanotic. It was an important detail, or so I thought. It didn't take long before the hospital visits became monthly and even weekly. I lost count by the time my twin girl nieces were 8 months old. It didn't surprise me when Mum muttered that it seemed that Abby and Lizzie had already spent more than half their lives in the hospital. Before reaching their first birthday, they already had their gallbladders removed to no avail. Every time my parents, husband, and I rallied around Fiona and the girls. After all, even when your sister is a pathological liar, she deserves emotional support. Our visits with her were still tense, though. My husband joined me in disliking Fiona, and our daughter had begun picking up on it, despite her being only 3 years old. Just before Abby and Lizzie turned a year old, they were able to come home from their latest hospital visit. We had a party all set up for the girls, and with Fiona behind on rent, we paid for it, and all her due rent that she still had yet to pay. It was a nice day. Then I went upstairs to help Fiona with Abby and Lizzie while my parents and husband kept my daughter busy. I don't think I ever fully forgave her for peeing on my school backpack and then lying about it. That, and there was so much nonsense she put me and our parents through. I was changing Lizzie's diaper and noticed Fiona smile. "What on earth are you smiling about?" "I had a man ask me to marry him." Not that I believed her. For one thing, she never mentioned any recent boyfriends, and besides, she couldn't even keep a boyfriend because of her constant lying. Then out of the corner of my eye, I thought I saw something. It looked kind of like it had ultramarine blue feathers streaked with blood. As soon as I turned to look, though, it was gone. I didn't say anything about it. I just wanted to get out of Fiona's presence. So I finished changing Lizzie's diaper and left her to be put to bed. Within half an hour, my husband, daughter, and I returned home. That night, a phone call from my parents told me and my husband that Abby and Lizzie were back in the hospital, thanks to another episode. I agreed that I would be the one to go to the hospital, and my husband could be home with our daughter. As I'd become accustomed to seeing both girls were cyanotic. Fiona was sobbing in the arms of the attending physician, a sight I'd also been accustomed to. I couldn't even be bothered to bat an eyelash at the sight of my sister crying like that, so I just asked where my nieces were and went to the medical bay. It wasn't long after when an attending physician managed to come into the room. Well, that was interesting to say the least. Where is she now? I managed to foist her upon a nurse. Well, let's see what the nurse says Fiona claimed this time around. And about who she shook hands with, I muttered. Even when she had sick children, she seemed to do that. I don't fully understand why I didn't stop to think before I said it. To this day, I couldn't be happier that I didn't stop myself. How do you mean?" the doctor asked. "Fiona's my sister. There have been times when she's claimed to have shaken hands with the likes of Denzel Washington or Robert Downey Jr. She even managed to lock down her high school. Has she always been like that? The first time it happened, she was only 3. She always was desperate for attention, if I do say so myself. Anyway, any clues to what's causing the cyanosis this time?" How do you know that term? Fiona told me what it meant. Why? After that, she rushed out of the room. A few moments later, I found myself talking with a psychiatrist and police officer. Fiona left the hospital in handcuffs and in the back of a police car that night, tears still flowing down her face. I thought getting custody of Abby and Lizzie would be the end of it all. Fiona still called me at home, though I usually kept them short. When you know what your sister did to your nieces, that's what tends to happen, or so I've heard. But I started getting calls from her and the correction officers about the injuries she started suffering. "You've got to get me out of here," she sobbed. "There's something in my cell with me. Blue feathers and blood oozing down the body. It won't stop biting me. Please just get me out of here." "Fiona, you know I can't do that. There's too much evidence against you, and I'm not going to prison for perjury." "I'm not lying, Jackie. There's something in here with me. It keeps making me bleed. Just get me out of here. I'm not lying this time." That's what you always say. That was how every phone call with her seemed to go. Every time I just hung up on her, not having the energy to deal with her constant lying. And that's how I thought it would stay. Until I got the call from the prison superintendent for the first time. Fiona had to be taken to the hospital. Not wanting to be in her presence, I simply told them to keep me updated about her condition. It's really strange, though. Those look a lot like bite marks on her arms, neck, and legs. Fiona's still muttering about something with blue feathers and streaks of blood. Knowing her history, nobody believed her, and especially not me. It did seem strange that she'd be that consistent about it, but details no longer mattered. And her habit of lying didn't stop just because she was in prison. She got herself in isolation multiple times for it, as I came to find out. Fiona was released from the hospital and returned to the prison soon after. A week or two later, she called me again. "You gotta help me. That blue-feathered thing, it followed me to isolation. It followed me. It followed me." Fiona, do you realize how old this is getting? You've lied too many times for me to even try believing you anymore. "I'm not lying, though. You have to believe me. It won't stop biting me." So says the one who got her entire high school on lockdown and her own self in prison for poisoning her children for attention. "I'm not lying. It won't stop biting me. If this thing doesn't stop, I'm gonna die. Help me out." You know what? I don't have time to deal with you anymore. Want to pester someone? Then annoy our parents. I can't respond to your phone calls anymore. And then I hung up. I held true to my word and never took her calls again. Within the month, our parents did the same thing. 5 months after I stopped taking her calls, Fiona was found dead in her cell. The corrections officers all told me she kept screaming throughout the night, during which time they simply couldn't open the cell door. They couldn't even see inside the cell through the windows or the cameras. It was only when the screaming stopped that they managed to finally get inside. They found her collapsed on the floor of her cell. Her head had been ripped clean off her body, and her spinal cord ripped out entirely. They never found it, nor did they ever find her eyes or tongue, which had also been ripped out. The skin on her torso and legs had even seemingly been turned into what resembled hamburger meat. Most strangely of all, though, however, was what they found underneath her body. 6 ultramarine blue feathers. Abby and Lizzie are 16 now. They don't remember their mother, though they are fully aware of what she did to them. I still think about how she was found, though. My parents can't help but wonder if she was telling the truth about the feathered thing biting her. What was she even hoping to achieve? I've never been able to figure out that. Whether it was for the thrill and the amusement, or simply for attention. There's one thing I can say. When I learned she died, I couldn't have been happier that she was finally gone. There is something I did notice, though. Abby was 6 when she went through a mercifully brief period of lying. Every time she told me a lie during that time, I could have sworn I saw something with blue feathers out of the corner of my eye. So quoth this raven. My darlings, if you like this story, and if you know someone like this, please let Nana488 know you really appreciated her story. And give me a like on this little video. If you comment, I will do my best to comment back. If you haven't subscribed, please do so and ring the little bell so you know when to come up and see me. If you're interested in some merch, there's a link down below. And if you want something that's not there, let me know. And I will see you next time, my darlings. Bye-bye.